Reito is a virgin loser who has an illness and is forced into cryo-sleep to save his life. However, when he wakes up, he discovers a deadly virus wiped out every other man on the planet. So now he has to crack every baddie on the planet to save humanity. This story starts with Reito confessing his feelings to his childhood crush Arisa. When she asks why he waited this long to tell her, he explains that he contracted a disease called cellular sclerosis and has to spend 5 years in cryo-sleep because the cure is not ready. This makes Arisa emotional because she won't get to ride his pogo stick for 5 years, so she leaves. Hours later, Reito meets up with his siblings, Maharu and Ryu, and after they arrive at the hospital, he gets prepped for cryo-sleep. However, after saying goodbye to Maharu and Ryu, he hears a familiar voice outside and sees Arisa. After Ryu tells the nurse to let her in, Reito gives her a special necklace and tells her to hold onto it until he wakes up. Minutes later, he gets placed in the cryo chamber, but as the fluid slowly shuts his body down, he hears Arisa promising to wait for him regardless of how long it takes, which makes him smile. 5 years later, Reito wakes up, but he is surrounded by faces he has never seen before. After a quick checkup to make sure his disease is gone, Reito asks to see his family, but a nurse with massive knockers named Mira walks in and offers to show him what happened while he was in cryo-sleep. Minutes later, Reito is in a blacked-out limo, wondering why he can't see outside. Mira then introduces herself as his attendant and the one in charge of his contact with the outside world. He gets confused by this and asks why he needs extra attention if the disease is already cured. Arisa then tells him how a new virus spread across the world 4 years ago and dropped humanity's population by 50%. All their scientists and grok experts have been searching for a cure, but there is still no hope. The next moment, she opens the blinds to show him how desolate the outside world has become. After she explains that even basic human resources are now scarce, Reito freaks out and runs out of the car. As he struggles to accept this new reality, he notices that he hasn't seen a single man since he woke up. After catching up to him, Mira explains that the virus only affected men, and since there is no cure, they were all wiped out, save for a very small number of men who were placed in cryo-sleep like him. Just then, a depraved lady tries to grab Reito, but Mira's soldier protects him, and Arisa further explains how he and the other men in cryo-sleep are humanity's last hope. Reito is still confused by all this, so she tells him to look around at all the ladies before asking him to save the planet by cracking them. Much later, in the hospital, he watches a documentary on how feminists took over the government and tried to stabilize the world over the last few years. To nobody's surprise, they did a horrible job until they discovered a man with Reito's condition who is immune to the virus. After they woke him up and realized that his seed could start a new generation of immune men, they decided to slowly start waking other men like him. With that, Mira walks up to Reito and drops her jugs in his face, before saying that this is the only way to restore humanity. Reito thinks she is messing with him, so he asks why they didn't use indirect methods of conceiving, and Mira tells him they did, but it only works with direct methods. Still, Reito refuses to believe that this is his life now, so he asks to go home. But Mira refuses and shows him a bunch of women to choose from. When he still doesn't fold, Mira calls in Maharu, who then tells him that everything Mira told him is true. She then takes him to the lab where he sees that his brother Ryu also had to be put in cryo-sleep to stop the virus, and he finally realizes that this isn't some fantasy wet dream. As they head back inside, he asks about Arisa, but Maharu says she has been missing for the last 3 years. Reito gets shocked and asks what happened, but all Maharu knows is that she just vanished one day. Mira then says she might already be dead, but he refuses to believe it and tries calling Arisa, but no one answers. Later that night, Mira gets called by one of her superiors, who reminds her that the goal is to get Reito to use his meat stick, not butter him up. After the call, she heads straight to Reito's room and reveals her gravity-defying racks before kissing him and asking for his man milk. Naturally, Reito folds, but just as he tries to give her the good stuff, he remembers Arisa and pushes her away. After Mira apologizes and leaves, Reito recalls that the necklace he gave Arisa has a tracker on it, so he checks and sees that it's still active, which gives him some hope. The next day, Mira takes Reito into a room and shows him a whole bunch of plot-heavy baddies so he can choose one, but this time, he completely loses it and tells her to stop treating him like a breeding bull. Mira then apologizes but begs him to do it because the other men in cryo-sleep won't last another year, because cryo-sleep only slowed the virus from unaliving them. After realizing that Ryu is one of the men at risk, Reito asks for 1 month to find Arisa because she is the only one he wants to crack. Mira agrees but also says he has to spend a night with a girl she chooses, even if he doesn't smash. Meanwhile, in a separate room, 2 smoking hot girls massage Hino, the first guy to be woken from cryo-sleep. Just then, his attendant, Neneko, walks in to ask if he has decided on a new girl to crack. However, as he looks through the options, she spots the movie he is currently watching and offers to get the main actress for him. Barely a couple of hours after this, Rena shows up at his room, dressed just like she was in the movie. She barely says a few words before Hino takes her to the bed and immediately starts putting in that work, stretching her out in places she didn't even know existed. The next morning, Reito joins Maharu and Mira for breakfast and asks why they have a bunch of plot-heavy chefs instead of robots. Mira then tells him that Hino specifically asked for human chefs so he can eat their kitties after breakfast. After she also says they need to pay close attention to their nutritional needs, Reito notices that she eats like she has a black hole in her belly. Maharu is also surprised that she has such an amazing physique despite all that food. However, when Reito agrees and stares a little too long at Mira's melons, Maharu gets pissed and storms out. After asking Reito for his parfait, Mira reminds him of their deal before saying that he will start sleeping with a nurse and bodyguard that she just assigned to him. Minutes later, Reito is on his way inside when Hino shows up with Neneko to meet him. After introductions, he asks Reito why he hasn't creamed any of the girls, and Reito says he is just not ready to become a community magnum, but Hino tells him to drop the good boy act and enjoy life a little. With that, he leaves, and Reito heads inside to take a bath. The moment he finishes, the light goes off, so he checks for the switch, but grabs a melon tip instead. The next moment, a thick dami mommy named Akane walks in and soaks her plots in booze so he can drink as much as he wants. After a sudden kiss, she tries to clean Reito's Excalibur, but he passes out from the little drink he took from her lips. Much later, Reito wakes up and sees another chick named Sui in his bed. The innocent look on her face makes him wonder if she is fit to be his nurse, but then Akane wakes up and decides to join them in bed again. Luckily, she promises not to slurp his glizzy this time, but Reito still spends the rest of the night wide awake. The next day, at an animal testing facility, Mira asks why he chose to come here of all places. He then tells her that Arisa worked there after college, and it's the first place he thought to look. Although the necklace he gave her is transmitting a signal, it can't show her actual location outside Japan, so he is just looking for clues about where she went. As they keep talking, a suspicious figure unlocks one of the animal testing rooms. The next moment, an enraged bear storms out, so Reito quickly grabs Sui and almost loses his arm in the process. He then tells Akane and Mira to escape, but Akane tells Sui to do her job, and she suddenly goes from helpless chick to the final boss of aura farming. After using a nasty drop kick to knock the bear out, she apologizes to Reito for putting him in danger, while Akane treats his wounds because she is actually the nurse, while Sui is his bodyguard. Mira then takes out her frustration on the terrified staff members before escorting Reito to the lab, where Arisa was conducting research before her disappearing act. While taking a look around, Reito spots an old picture that reminds him of the day Arisa's dog got diagnosed with an incurable disease. After bawling her eyes out, she decided to become a scientist to develop a cure for it, but Reito said it was pointless because it would take years to accomplish. Despite this, Arisa insisted on her decision and said it was the best way to make sure other people don't feel her pain, so Reito decided to support her by becoming a doctor as well. After the trip down memory lane, he asks Mira how many men are in cryo sleep, and she says between 1 and 5 million. However, without a cure for the virus, they won't last more than a year. Reito then takes a moment to think before saying that he now wants to develop a cure for the virus because cracking random baddies every day will only give him about 100 offspring, while finding a cure will save the world. Around the same time, Maharu is at a refugee camp giving out supplies when a news broadcast comes on. As they all watch, Reito introduces himself and promises to save the world by finding a cure for the virus. The broadcast spreads across the globe in minutes, and Arisa sees it, but she quickly leaves with a friend to avoid any unwanted attention. Meanwhile, Maharu is already back in the facility, telling Reito that he just put himself in more danger because the rest of the world didn't even know that there was a man with immunity to the virus. After Reito says he has to do this to save their brother and the other men, she kisses him on the cheek for good luck and pulls out a teddy bear she found in Arisa's lab. Inside, Reito sees a smart ring and quickly runs into the bathroom to play a recording Arisa saved on it. She addressed it to him to let him know that she left to research the virus because she discovered that it was man-made. After watching the rest of the video, Reito heads out to clear his head and sees Mira, so he takes a walk with her. When she suddenly apologizes for what happened at the testing facility, he stops her and says he should be the one apologizing because he has refused to crack anyone, which is probably making trouble for her. He also thanks her for supporting his decision and says she is a lot like Arisa. Mira then admits that he is kind before heading inside to take a bath and comparing herself to Arisa. Later that night, a bunch of directors hold a meeting to discuss the progress with making offspring. After they all express frustration with Reito and watch some clips from Hino's escapades, they decide to prepare for the third resistant man since Reito refuses to get it up. Meanwhile, Hino is having the time of his life with 3 gorgeous hotties in the bathroom. 5 years back, in a school somewhere in the county, a helpless nerd named Shada was getting his nuts kicked in by a bully and his friends. They wanted him to goon to a famous singer he loved watching, and when he refused, they almost sent him to his ancestors before soaking him in toilet bowl water. Minutes later, Shota was dragging himself back to class and cursing the world because everyone knew what was happening, but they all avoided him like the plague. The worst part was that his best friend, who he once saved from the bullies, also acted like he didn't even exist, so Shota went to the music room to think. While he was there, a teacher named Yuzuki walked in with her massive racks and asked what was troubling him. When he told her how everyone was treating him, she got closer and told him to forget them because she knew who he really was. This made Shota feel a little better, but he suddenly felt a sharp pain in his chest and told Yuzuki that it had been happening for a while. She then leaned in to check his temperature and suggested paying a visit to the hospital to get it checked out. Much later, Shota went for a checkup and got diagnosed with the same condition as Reito. The next day at school, Yuzuki explained his diagnosis to everyone, but as Shota tried to speak up, they all walked out like he meant nothing. Yuzuki could only apologize, but Shota was way too hurt for that, so he left and saw that his best friend didn't even care to check in. He then went to the backyard to hide, but the alpha bully was right there cracking his shoddy, Erica. After seeing him, they both took turns kicking his nuts again before the bully laughed about how he would die as a virgin. Later that night, Shota was in bed, wondering why he had been dealt such a bad hand in life when his sister called. Mayu wanted to check in and was upset that their father couldn't even make time to go back home. Shota was also worried about her and hoped they would get a cure for her condition. When Mayu asked about the cryo sleep, he explained that it would be for 5 years and joked that she would be the older sibling after it. The next day, he showed up for the procedure and told the nurse not to bother waiting because no one was coming for him. In the present, he has just woken up and sees a weirdly excited chick named Karen, who introduces herself as his assistant. After promising to make his life so much better, they head back to his school. While a bunch of girls talk about Shota, Karen takes him into his dorm room and tells him that they kept 2 beds for a special reason. Shota then asks why she is doing all this for him, so she explains how the United Women's Organization tasked her with looking after his every need. This makes him realize that he must be valuable. But since he already has an idea of what happened, he asks if he is really the only guy awake. Karen then claims that all the other men are in cryo sleep and shows him his dad. After she assures him that it's nothing to worry about, Shota asks for a way to see his sister, because she will still be with their mom in America. Unfortunately, Karen says it won't be possible because the world is a mess, with so many countries fighting for resources and control. She also explains that being resistant to the virus doesn't mean he is totally safe, which is why they are limiting him to the dorm and school facilities. After promising that he will have a ton of fun, Karen takes Shota to class and helps with his introduction because the spineless weeb can't handle so many baddies staring at him. Minutes later, while in his seat, he wonders if this is really his life now and decides to focus on the fact that he doesn't have to deal with bullies anymore. However, the thought of getting close to these new girls still terrifies him. Karen notices this and tells him that she has something special to show him after classes. Much later, they head out, and while walking the halls, Shota asks if there is any point to still having school. So Karen explains that it's especially important because the elites need to be educated to get them through this apocalypse. Moments later, they walk into the music room, and Shota gets shocked to see Yuzuki with even bigger melons than he remembers. After Karen tells her to reward Shota for getting better, she leaves, and Yuzuki quickly grabs his hand before asking if he can come to her dorm room later in the night. Afterwards, Shota sits by the sports field to distract himself by watching the girls play. However, he keeps thinking of why Yuzuki wants him in her room and gets flustered. Just then, Karen shows up, and after she tells him about the girls, he admits that it felt a little scary being the only boy in school at first, but they all seem pretty chill. Karen then says no one has the time to be a bully anymore, and this makes Shota wonder what happened to the bully squad from 5 years ago. Later that night, Shota shows up to Yuzuki's room and tries to contain his manly desires as her cakes jiggle under the nightgown. After sitting on her bed, his eyes keep tracing over her plot until she asks if he still finds her attractive. Before he can respond, she kisses him and pushes him into the bed before charging up his lightsaber. They then spend the entire night fulfilling every one of Shota's creepy fantasies. The next day, in class, Shota reminisces on all the positions Yuzuki showed him until a chick named Natsu starts talking to him. When she asks about his interests, Shota shows her the idol group he has been obsessed with for years, but then another girl named Shunka joins the conversation because she is a huge fan just like him. Shota gets excited by this and focuses on Shunka, but this makes Natsu jealous. After classes, Shota heads to the gym to watch the volleyball players, but an irrelevant midget named Chifu accuses him of staring at their cakes before deciding to join the game. She challenges the best player, Akira, who then spots Shota and decides to give it her all. Moments later, Chifu tries to counter Akira's strike, but it bounces off her face and hits Shota. As everyone rushes to check on him, Akira drops to her knees and promises to do anything he wants just to make it up to him. Minutes later, Shota tries to enjoy some peace and quiet in the music room, but Yuzuki shows up to check on him. Despite seeing that it was just a small bruise, she cleans it with her tongue before telling him to do the same to her melons because they hurt from last night. While Shota starts getting her special spot soaked, Karen explains her plans for him to a superior. Over the following days, Shota and Yuzuki spend every waking moment cracking and making creamy pies all over campus. After a week of smashing, he wakes up to her kisses again and sees that his special milk is making her look even better. As she makes breakfast, he decides to get a quick one in since they have nothing else to do today. Afterwards, Karen drags him to the pool so he can work out with the girls. When he asks why, she reminds him that Yuzuki is not the only chick he can crack, but Shota only wants her. Regardless, Karen makes him join the others, and as they stretch, Shota starts feeling anxious because they won't stop staring. Minutes later, Shota tries to enjoy a calm swim, but then Akira and Shunka start racing each other while the other girls cheer them on. After Akira wins, Shota gets flustered looking at their cakes before Chifuyu walks over and says she will be even better. When he asks why they are all competing, she only tells him to expect a show when she swims, but then Akira walks over to apologize for what happened the other day. Shota struggles to focus because her kitty is right in his face, and just as he tries to respond, Chifuyu exposes Akira's massive racks to him. Pissed, Akira throws her into the water, and the fun-sized dummy forgets how to stand, so the other girls help her out. The next moment, Shota hears that Natsu is the winner, so he waves to her, but still has no idea what they are competing for. Later that night, Yuzuki says she won't be able to come for their usual workout because she has work to do. After the call, he hears a knock on his door and sees Natsu, who then says she will be staying in his room. Shota then calls Karen, and she explains that they are working on some rooms, so Natsu has to spend a week with him. Shota then realizes that this is what they were competing for earlier, and Karen further explains that there will be a new girl in his room every week. The next morning, Shota quickly gets ready for school and wonders if this is connected to Yuzuki not coming to see him anymore. After noticing that Natsu hasn't changed, he asks why, and she asks him to help her do it because her maids always did it back home. This makes Shota realize that she is really a trust fund brat, so he agrees to help and desperately struggles to keep it in his pants while dressing her. Hours later, during lunch, Karen explains how rich Natsu's family is and admits that it's crazy she needs someone to dress her every time. However, she suggests taking it a step further and also helping her bathe, but Shota freaks out and pukes water all over her. After Karen leaves to clean up, Shunka shows up, so Shota asks if Natsu also needs help in the shower. Shunka then says she always went with her previous roommate and heads out while he wonders how he could easily talk to her without folding. Much later, Shota calls Yuzuki again to schedule a workout, but she refuses again, so he asks if she is avoiding him. Yuzuki then says it's that time of the month, and Shota immediately apologizes for not being considerate. After telling him not to worry about it, Yuzuki also insists that he start getting friendly with the other girls because they will get upset if he only talks to her. Later that night, Shota wonders if the other girls actually like him. After recalling the time Natsu got jealous in class, he turns over to sleep, but then she asks to sleep in his bed and explains that she has always had someone sleep with her. Shota agrees, so she gets in and thanks him for not telling anyone about the scar on her cheeks. She further explains how she was betrothed to some old creep to help her father's business, but her dad and the future husband got slimed by the virus. After saying that she felt good when it happened, Natsu asks if he thinks she is a bad person, but Shota says he is also happy with the way things turned out since he can be with her. The next moment, they kiss, and Shota takes the opportunity to finally see what she is hiding under her plot armor. Natsu also gets excited to see his meatloaf charged up, so they spend the rest of the night cracking. The next morning, a news segment shows Reito still obsessing over a cure for the virus and how some of the ladies are reacting to his dedication. After the show, he asks Mira why this is even a thing, and she explains that almost everyone in the country tunes in to see him. She then warns that Miharu's constant trips to the refugee camp might put her in danger since someone might recognize her as his sister. Reito immediately leaves to find Miharu, but then he sees Hino, who then shows him a scan from one of his pregnant girls. After admitting that he is excited, he grabs Reito's jewels and warns him to start using them before they shrink. By then, Shota has just woken up to take some water, and when Natsu asks for some, he feeds it to her with a kiss. Much later, he finally sees Yuzuki again, but after asking about his time with Natsu, she suddenly gets emotional and says he belongs to everyone. When he asks what she means, Yuzuki tells him to ask Karen and runs off. Minutes later, on the rooftop, Karen shows up to answer Shota, and he tells her to drop the act because he now knows the real reason they brought him back here after the cryo sleep. They plan to experiment on him to find a possible cure, and the girls are probably being forced to put up with this so he won't leave. After commending him for figuring out this much, Karen takes him back to class and explains that every girl in school was selected because they all like him. She further explains that the whole point is to help him crack all of them and save the world by making offspring with immunity to the virus. To prove this, she makes the girls reveal their plots for him, And while Shada struggles to believe all this, the women on the organization board decide to fire Mira because she can't get Reito to smash anyone. Days later, Reito recalls the promise he made to Mira and wonders if he will be able to keep it. On his way out of the lab, he gets shocked to see a red-haired chick who then bumps into him with her jugs hanging out. After she runs off, Reito heads to the cafeteria and signs a couple of autographs before another chick tells the girls to stay away from him. Reito gets surprised by the sudden hostility, but she insists that he is a creep and says that all the attention he is getting will end soon. Shortly after this, Reito rushes to see Mira because he just heard about the decision to fire her. Once inside, he sees two ministers, who then introduce Rhea and Maria as his new attendants. They explain that while Maria will support his research, Rhea will help with any needs he might have. With that, Mira gets dismissed, and when he tries to stop her, the ministers tell him to take her back to his room if he really likes her. Naturally, he refuses, so they tell him to accept his new attendance and leave. Rhea then says he should have just cracked someone if he wanted Mira to keep her job. She also says his usual freedom will be restricted if he insists on keeping all that meat to himself. Minutes later, Rhea stops Mira to talk and reveals her sweet side, but Mira only tells her to take care of Reito. Rhea then says he is not worth all that attention, but Mira says she just doesn't know him and admits that she still looks beautiful before leaving. The next day, on a train, Reito asks Maria where they are going. So she tells him about the hot springs in Kimon City before, saying that someone important to his research is there. Reito excitedly stands up to hear more, but he makes Maria spill juice all over herself, so she leaves to get cleaned up while Mira watches from a couple of seats away. When Akane tells her to just go over there, she refuses and says she can only observe since he has new attendants. Just then, Reito stands outside the bathroom and apologizes to Maria, but she tells him not to worry because she is just not used to being around him. After suggesting that she treat him more casually, Reito asks if she has any idea how the virus started, so she starts sharing her theories with him. However, when he says it might have been made artificially, a switch flips in her brain, and she opens the door to yap about the possibility while showing off her milkers again. Reito tries to ignore this until she tells him that the person in Kaimon is connected to the very first infection case. Hours later, they arrive at a resort in the city, and while Sui gets excited, Rei explains that they should have the entire place to themselves, save for some students on a school trip. As Akane also gets excited to tour the resort, Rhea reminds them that this isn't some holiday, but Akane tells her to ease up for once. As they all ignore her to have fun, she gets pissed and starts yelling. Much later, Reito finds a relaxing bath and learns how to control the projection right before all the girls walk in without plot armor to join him. He immediately tries to leave, but Akane stops him and offers to wash his back. He refuses and says he should be the one doing that for her instead. So she accepts and tells him to wash all their backs. Left with no escape, Reita starts washing their back and accidentally gives Maria's kitty a little too much action. After he washes Mira and realizes that she has the best-looking cakes, Rhea refuses to let him touch her, so Akane takes her turn. However, she gets a lot freakier than usual and makes him touch the special spot, so Reita runs away. The next day, the girls take him to meet Emi, the old lady whose husband was the first to get infected in Japan. They try to introduce Reito, but she tells them to save it because she already knows who he is, and she doesn't want to tell them anything. After Rhea and Maria explain that anything she tells them can help save the world, she still refuses and says they got all the information they needed when they sliced up her husband's body. Maria tries to explain that they were just doing an autopsy, but Emi doesn't want to hear another word, so Reito asks what it will take for her to help them. She initially jokes about him cracking her cemetery-grade kitty, but after she still refuses to say anything, they leave. And the girls tell Reito that her husband lived off the grid around the time of his infection. He also hated the organization because the world back then was very hostile to men. Later that night, Emi calls Arisa to tell her about Reito. The next day, Reita goes back to Emi's room to talk again, but she tells him to start making offspring because she has nothing to tell him about the virus and her husband. After she says he is probably already having fun with the girls, Reita tells her about his refusal to mate. Emi then tells everyone else to leave before asking Reito if he likes men, because any other guy would be cracking like a rabbit on coke. Reito then admits that he actually wants to sometimes, but because of his love for Arisa, he can't bring himself to do anyone else. This strikes a chord in Emi's old heart, but she still tells him to leave. Later that night, Reito thanks Sui for letting him use the open-air bath. Just as she tells him how risky this is, some girls walk in, so she rushes to distract them while Reita hides in the sauna. The next moment, an exchange student named Chloe walks in and calmly sits beside him before threatening to scream if he tries to leave. She then challenges Reito to see who stays in the sauna longer, and if he loses, he has to do whatever she says. After he agrees, Chloe displays her foreign milkers to break his warrior spirit, but Reito resists until she passes out from excessive heat. He quickly carries her inside and tries to call Akane, but Chloe stops him and threatens to scream if he doesn't feed her water with his mouth. Left with no choice, Reito leans in, but then Sui returns with the others, and they all get upset with him for trying to crack a stranger before them. The next day, Reito is back in the hospital trying to sway Emi, but she refuses to speak and sends him to buy pastries. After he leaves with Rhea, Emi asks Mira about something that happened with Arisa before asking about Reito. Mira then says that his decision to wait for Arisa is selfish, but also admits that it makes him an admirable man. By the time Reito finally returns, Emi rejects the pastries, but tells him to come back tomorrow so she can tell them about her husband. They all get excited to hear this and leave, while Emi recalls her conversation with Arisa and how she promised to only love Reito, even if he starts cracking other girls. Later that night, someone drugs Emi, and by the time Reito and the girls rush to the hospital, she is already in a coma. A nurse then gives Reito a picture and says she specifically told them to give it to him. Much later, Reito heads to the hospital where Emi's husband was admitted at the time of his infection. As they head inside, Sui panics and admits that she is terrified of ghosts before asking him to turn around, but Reito refuses and says they have nothing to worry about because it's still bright outside. Minutes later, Reito notes that they can't find a single lead about the infection from it, so Maria explains that it's still their best bet at figuring out what happened back then. The next moment, he spots some ladies outside and realizes that this must also be a refugee camp, so he asks if the United Women organization doesn't seem to care about them. Around the same time, Hino's girls start yet another round of horse riding, but this time, Hino realizes that he has grown tired of cracking random chicks every day. While he tries to enjoy being with his girls, Akane joins Ria in the bath and asks if she has something to say about what happened to Emi. She had a look at Emi's records and realized that someone poisoned her, but Ria says she will consider looking into it. As she gets up to leave, Akane drags her into the pool and asks what she was doing the night before, so Ria explains how she made a report to her superiors about Reito. She then insists that Akane has no right to question her, and after Akane gets up to leave, Ria asks if she is just concerned about the director. Later that day, Ria returns the photo to Reito, and Maria explains that they had to make sure it had no traces of a harmful virus or bacteria. As he then tries to keep it, Arisa's smart ring reacts, but before he can grab it, Maria shows him the school her younger sister is currently attending. When he suggests stopping by to see her sister, Maria tells him not to bother because she is probably busy with her studies. Turns out, this is the same school where Shada is currently on a kitty-cracking marathon. Not long after this, Hino heads into town with Neneko and thanks her for letting him choose the next girl he gets to work out with. She also commends him for coming up with the idea, but then he spots his next lover, who turns out to be Miharu. Meanwhile, Reito has just entered a bathroom at the station to see why Arisa's smart ring reacted to the picture. A file opens, and inside, he finds instructions to create the virus, which proves that Arisa was right about it being man-made. He immediately packs up and decides to use this to find a cure, but once outside, he decides to keep this information to himself because he is not sure the girls can be trusted. Later that night, in a refugee camp, a chick named Mimi struggles to escape another depraved girl until Ria suddenly knocks her out. After thanking her with a kiss, Mimi asks Ria if she has fallen in love with some girl at the organization because she no longer comes to spend time with her. Ria then asks her to do something important, and Mimi agrees without question. By then, Reito is back at the facility with Maria, thinking of a way to get more resources because he can't fully restore the data needed to produce a cure on his own. After also recalling that he can't trust anyone, he asks Maria why research for a cure is moving so slowly, despite the fact that he and Hino are always available to help with a vaccine or cure. Maria then says she has also wanted to further her research, but access to data on the virus is limited. The worst part is that all the top researchers around the world have been taken to the headquarters in America. When Reito suggests bringing some of the Japanese researchers back, Maria says she has actually asked her superiors countless times, but they always refuse. Just then, Neneko asks Reito for a moment of his time, so they head inside, where she tells him about Hino's newfound obsession with Miharu. After Miharu says she will never get into the same bed with Hino, Reito reminds them that she is not even at that stage yet. Neneko also agrees with him but explains that Hino is not the type to easily give up on what he wants. At this, Miharu asks Reito to talk to Hino on her behalf, but he doesn't see the point. However, after the other girls explain that it would sound better coming from him, Reito agrees. Minutes later, he tells Hino to forget about Miharu, but the usually boastful playboy starts begging for just a chance to talk to her. Reito insists that nothing will ever happen between them, but when Hino keeps begging to just talk to her, Reito agrees to speak with Miharu. Much later, Ria and Neneko tell the ministers what happened, and after they all agree that Hino cannot force Miharu to accept him, one of them suggests talking about the recent attacks from refugee camps. When they all start arguing about which department gets the most resources, Ria suggests that Reito hand out the next batch of rations in refugee camps to stop the riots. After taking a second to think, they agree but make Ria promise to keep him protected. Meanwhile, Reito hops in the shower to get cleaned up, but Maria and Akane suddenly join him. Before he can respond, they tell him that people are watching, so they had to do this to get him alone because he has been researching the virus outside the facility. As Reito realizes what they are talking about, Maria warns that doing this could get him murked by their superiors. This makes Reito realize that they don't trust the ministers, and Akane further reveals that her mom is actually in charge of the Japanese branch of the United Women's Organization. Just then, Rei shows up to tell Reito about the rations, so Akane acts like she just interrupted something unholy. Afterward, Ria enters Mira's room and tries to riz her up by confessing her feelings, but Mira tells her to knock it off because she has never felt that way about her. The next day, in a refugee camp, Reito and Sui show up at a hideout that the girls prepared. After assuring them that Ria doesn't know about it, he commends them on setting up all this gear. Minutes later, he starts handing out rations as expected, but while most of the women get excited to see him, a certain group discusses the fact that he is just a pawn being used to stop them from fighting back. Around the same time, Ria spots a sniper trying to take him out, but Mimi intercepts the attack and sends the assassin to God. She then calls Rei to ask if she has actually fallen for Reito because she seems way too concerned for his safety. However, Rei insists that she is only doing this for someone she cares about. The next day, Hino finally gets his chance with Miharu, but she quickly gets bored and leaves, which leaves him shocked because no girl has ever rejected him before. Much later, Reito joins the girls to continue their research while Hino makes his girls climax and hops in the shower. When Rena joins him and asks if he is thinking about Miharu, he denies it and hugs her while clearly still thinking about Miharu. By then, Maria had just stumbled upon the hospital records of a fellow researcher who should be in the American branch of the United Women's Organization. After finding records of all the other researchers who went missing, they all realize that the abandoned hospital is where the virus was first developed. Several nights later, Natsu tries to get freaky with Shota because it's their last night together, but after kissing her, Shota gets fed up and says he is not in the mood. As she starts crying, he heads out for some fresh air, but Karen shows up and asks why he is not inside. Shota then asks if he is not allowed to go out, and after joking about it, she says he just has to wait until graduation. After taking him back inside, she tells him to enjoy his last night with Natsu because he is getting a new girl tomorrow. The next day, in class, Karen tells the girls to pick cards to decide who gets to stay with Shota, so Shifu decides to go first, thinking the anime gods are on her side. Unfortunately, they don't want to see her unripe cakes getting cracked, so she fails, and Natsu also picks the wrong card. Just as Natsu regrets not being able to compete, a girl named Rika picks the right card and tells Shota to expect a steamy night in his bed. Shota panics and heads to the restroom because she reminds him of his bullies, but then Rika walks in. After he trips, Rika says she can't wait and tries to ride his pogo stick, but the trauma gets to Shota, so she runs to a teacher's office to hide. While looking around, he recalls how he always came here when the bullying got crazy. He then recognizes a girl's photo on the wall before Shunka walks in. They both get shocked to see each other, but Shunka quickly realizes what is going on, so she sits on the sofa and tells him to join her. Once he does, she asks about the bruises on his body, and he tells her about what happened back then. The next moment, Shunka opens her shirt to show him the bruises she got from bullies a couple of years ago. After explaining how she eventually learned to make good friends, she says this room has always been her escape when she feels overwhelmed. This makes Shota emotional, but then she asks to see his bruises, so he takes off his shirt as well and kisses her. After Shunka helps Shota grab her melons, he starts kissing every bruise he can find, even the ones under her plot armor. Much later, he takes her back to his room, but Rika is already there, waiting for him. She immediately starts arguing, and after Shunka says he has the right to choose, Rika realizes that they already smashed, so she drops her plot armor and tells Shota to take her to Pound Town as well. As Shunka starts another argument, Shota gets overwhelmed and runs out to breathe. Once outside, he tries to call Yuzuki, but she doesn't answer, so he sits to think about everything. Just then, Akira shows up and decides to sit with him. When she asks about his experience with Rika, he says that living with a total stranger is way too exhausting. Akira then asks about the bruise on his forehead, and after he says it's gone, she offers to do anything he wants as her way of apologizing again. This time, Shota tells her to pull her shirt up, but immediately claims he was kidding. However, Akira obeys, so he grabs her melons and squeezes before covering them up and running off. The following evening, he sees her cleaning the court and decides to apologize for being so rude last night. Akira then tells him to help her clean the equipment if he really means it, so he agrees. Moments later, they enter the storage room, but instead of showing him the equipment, Akira locks the door and pushes Shota to the ground before tying up his legs. He immediately tells her to stop, but Akira refuses and says she has been waiting for this moment for ages. Before he can say anything else, she cleans his special tool, and starts riding while Natsu listens from the door. Afterwards, Akira apologizes, but Shota barely responds and acts as if nothing happened. The next day, in class, Karen says she will now assign a girl to take care of him in school every day so he can get closer to everyone while still living with a new roommate every week. Since Rika hasn't spent any time in his room, Karen assigns her first and tells Shota to give her a good morning kiss. As usual, he gets embarrassed and tries to talk his way out of it, but Karen makes everyone look away so Rika can kiss him. After the first kiss, she tries to continue, but Shota gets up to leave again. However, after he trips, Karen sees that he bruised his palm and sends him to the infirmary for a checkup. Moments later, the nurse finishes up and tells him to get on the bed for a full-body checkup. After the checkup, Shota asks why the bed is so big, so Karen shows up to answer by summoning Natsu, Shunka, and Akira. Turns out, the full-body check was just a plan to get him in bed with all three of them at once. As soon as Karen leaves, Shunka starts by kissing his bruise again while Natsu and Akira activate his lightsaber for the real fun. Minutes later, Karen watches Shota having the time of his life and tells a familiar-looking girl to get ready for the next phase. The next day, Shota finds Chifuyu messing around in the lab and asks what she is up to. She gets flustered and uses that opportunity to get close to him, but when she tries to get freaky, he stops her and tells her to try again after she actually grows some plot cannons.
Emotional, damn it!
Later that night, Karen tells Shota that Yuzuki suddenly decided to transfer out of the city, and when he gets pissed at her for letting it happen, she calmly says that nothing can be done at this point. This flips a switch in Shota's heart, so he decides to spend the night alone. The next day in class, he gets a new girlfriend assignment and casually kisses her with zero emotion, before telling Karen to send her to his room at night. Days later, just as he starts getting used to the girls wanting his meat stick, Karen introduces a new transfer student, but Shota immediately recognizes her as Shion. Back when men were still around, and he was getting bullied, Shion was the hottest chick in school and had creeps drooling over her hot bod daily. One day, the bullies took Shota up to the roof, and Shion happened to walk in for lunch at the time. However, despite seeing what they were doing to Shota, she acted like he didn't matter and continued laughing with her girls. Back in the present, Shota tries to take a breather on the roof, but Shion shows up to talk to him. When she suddenly begs for his help, he asks if she knows why the school was set up for him. She says yes, so he asks her to drop her plot covers, but she gets shocked and hesitates. As he starts heading back inside, she tries to stop him, but Shota says she can't possibly expect his help after the way she treated him back then. Minutes later, she asks Shunka about what Shota likes, but Natsu tells her to stop acting like they can be friends because the entire school knows that she is a failed idol trying to get some clout from Shota. After they both leave, Akira explains that while every girl in school is competing for Shota's love, they are also friends, but no one knows her or even wants to get close to her. Minutes later, in class, Shota asks Karen why she even let Shion join the school, so Karen explains that her career tanked after all the men passed away. Now, her only hope to get hired by the organization is if she pleases him in bed, but Shota is worried that he won't be able to do anything with her if she doesn't actually want it. At this, Karen suggests testing Shion to see just how serious she is about pleasing him. The next day, Shion shows up with no skirt and, as expected, everyone starts staring like she is some street hoe. Regardless, Karen tells her to go a step further, so she drops her shirt as well before heading to class. Shota then realizes that she is his assigned girlfriend for the day, so he kisses her and tells her to come to the roof later. After classes, Shion shows up, and Shota explains that he will help her get a job at the organization if she agrees to let him hit. Shion says yes and suggests going back to his room, but then Shota invites some of his girls to watch as he strips Shion. He then takes her up to the railing, where he got bullied so she can feel what it was like for him back then. Later that night, Karen shows up to check on him, and after he admits that this new life is pretty awesome, she tells him to go even crazier, because he can literally do whatever he wants with whoever he wants. Shota then asks if he can get freaky with her, and after a brief pause, Karen says yes. However, Shota wants something else entirely. Meanwhile, Reito and the girls have just decided to do a deeper investigation of the old hospital because they definitely missed something the first time. The next day, Shota helps the school nurse measure Akira's plots, and after she leaves, Shota says he already knows that they are simply making it easier for him to get closer to the girls. The nurse agrees before climbing the bed to show him that she is also packing some serious meat under her scrubs. A couple of days after this, Karen takes him to a private room and explains that she had to find Erica, the nasty chick who enjoyed bullying him back then. Naturally, Erica gets shocked to see him and tries to run her mouth, but Karen reminds her of her place before leaving. Shota then thinks back to all the times she bullied him before dumping a whole bucket of toilet water on her. Erica tries to yell at him again, but he loses it and tells her not to even think of speaking to him rudely again. The next moment, Erica threatens to unalive herself if he tries to smash, but Shota says he would never do it with her before dropping his pants. He then drags her into the stall and makes her clean his bruises with her tongue. Later that night, Karen gets a call from the Minister of Public Welfare about the progress with Shota, and after they talk about it, she tells Karen about a messenger who is coming from headquarters soon. She suspects that an informant has already told them about Shota and Hino, so she warns Karen to be super careful. Over the following days, Karen tells the girls in class to get even more desperate and prove their love for Shota, so they start unleashing their wildest fantasies in class with him. During sports class, Shota watches the girls compete as usual, but then Natsu suddenly tells him to stand up. After she cuts his shorts, Akira tells him to climb into her swimsuit quickly so no one will notice. Left with no choice, he agrees, and they hide in the water until everyone leaves. Shota then says they are doing way too much, and after apologizing, Natsu begs him to punish them with his lightsaber. One night, Shota takes a new girl back to his room, but she gets nervous because Erika is chained up right beside his bed. After telling her not to worry, Shota asks Erika if her boyfriend survived the virus and starts laughing because he already knows the answer. When Erika tells him to get over it, he grabs her face and reminds her that although it has been 5 years for her, he still remembers what happened like it was yesterday. As he continues working out with his new girlfriend, Erika watches and starts craving some of his wood. Later that night, he sees her shivering on the floor and recalls that she is an addict, so he offers her a pill, but she has to take it from his tongue. She hesitates again, but this time, Shota forces her to take it. The next day, Reito gets on a train with the girls and recalls what Arisa said in that recording about the virus. Meanwhile, on a plane close to Japan, a messenger from headquarters calls her superiors to discuss the details of her mission. They then tell her that the leaders of the Japanese branch are hiding the other men with resistance to the virus. They started suspecting this after Reita's television debut was approved without permission from them, so her mission is to figure out the truth. While they continue talking, the Japanese minister meets with Director Kihara to discuss the messenger's trip. They agree that headquarters definitely suspects them, but after throwing out a lot of ideas, they settle on a plan to keep their true operations hidden. By then, Shota had just walked into class to find his girlfriend for the day. After seeing her, he kisses her and asks her to come to his room, but she hesitates and says it's her time of the month. Shota then apologizes and tells her to come at another time. Later that night, the Minister of Welfare calls Karen to inform her of the messenger coming from headquarters. At the same time, the chick from earlier washes her mouth and calls Arisa, who then apologizes for making her act like she is one of Shota's hoes. While Shota slowly becomes a cold and soulless harem lord, Reito and the girls finally arrive at the abandoned hospital, but as they look through the halls, Reito asks how they got permission to take the trip. Akane then says it was all thanks to Mera before asking Reito how he feels about her because she definitely likes him. He suddenly gets flustered, so Akane asks if he is still a virgin and says it would explain why he can easily resist them since he doesn't even know what it feels like. After Sui tells her to stop teasing him, Maria scares her again and she accidentally breaks a hidden wall. Back at the Japanese branch, the messenger has just arrived, so Director Kihara greets her, thinking she is the ex-military messenger called Mansfield. However, she claims to just be assisting Mansfield, who is currently investigating another matter. By then, Reito and the girls have just found a massive air duct in the walls, so they climb in and eventually spot an opening into a fully functioning lab. Akane gets excited to see it, but their weight causes the duct to cave in, exposing them to the Minister of Technology. After taking a look around, Moria realizes that all the Japanese virologists and scientists went missing because they had been helping her develop the virus in secret. The minister then decides to send them all to heaven to protect the secret, but they are suddenly ambushed by Chloe, who is actually Mansfield, an operative of the organization who moved here and acted like a regular schoolgirl just to get close enough. Before she can fully explain everything, her soldier notes that several bombs are about to go off, so she leads Reito and the girls to a military gunship, which they then use to escape. Around the same time, Karen stops Shion from escaping and says no one is allowed to leave until Shota has had his fill of their plots. Meanwhile, Chloe's assistant has just exposed Director Kihara's schemes, so she orders her soldiers to arrest the messenger, only to be shocked when they turn on her instead. One of the ministers, named Shudo, then admits that she was a spy working for headquarters and feeding them information this entire time. While Kihara and the other ministers get arrested, Chloe tells Reito how they created the virus and spent the following years making secret moves that have greatly affected the organization's reputation. They are the reason a bunch of terrorists, including Arisa, have now dedicated themselves to attacking the organization. This makes Reito recall the day he went out with Arisa and listened to her concerns about the state of the world. While he wonders what made her become a terrorist, Shota returns to his room and decides to pity Erika with a blanket. However, just as he tries to hit the snooze button, explosions go off across campus. Minutes later, Reito sees the fire, and Maria reminds them that her sister goes to the school. Chloe then receives word that one of the immune men has been kidnapped. Much later, Shota wakes up in the hospital and asks Karen what happened, but the girls rush inside to see him, so he asks if they are okay. Much later, he meets Karen on the roof and asks what really happened at school. She then throws a napkin at the invisible barrier and explains that a spy probably disabled it to help terrorists get in. After also explaining how a lot of groups are currently opposing the United Women's Organization, Karen asks why he jumped to save Erica if he hates her. Shota then says he was only acting on instinct, and this makes Karen happy because having a harem hasn't completely affected his good heart. Curious, Shota asks for her real goals, because she still seems obsessed with helping him despite everything. Karen then says she is aiming to take over as the #1 woman in the world, and she wants him to be at the top right beside her. Shota still feels a bit skeptical, so he asks why she has never tried to join him in bed to have his first offspring. After Karen says she prefers being a coach, Shota takes a moment to think before ultimately agreeing to support her. Just then, Erissa's friend calls her to apologize for not taking him, but Erissa tells her not to worry, because they already captured #4. Meanwhile, at the Japanese office, Reito and the others get debriefed by Shudo, who has now taken over from the corrupt ministers. She explains that all the awakened men are to be brought back to the facility and their attendants as well, including Mira. After also stating that all harem practices are to be suspended, she leaves them to Mira, who then explains how Erissa's group kidnapped the 4th man. She also commends Reito for not starting a harem like Hino because the girls he was cracking had no choice. This makes Reito concerned because Hino never seemed like the type to force a girl, but Chloe tells him not to worry about anything before heading inside for a call with her superior. While they talk, Akane takes Reito to the bathroom to talk, and after turning on the shower, she admits that her mom has always been a hard-headed psycho who even missed her own son's funeral. However, that was because she always wanted to protect the country and make sure it survived the pandemic. With tears running down her face, she assures Reito that Kihara didn't make the virus, so he promises to help her. At the same time, Chloe enters Hino's room and assures him that they are only taking measures to ensure his safety. However, when she asks Rina to leave and says she can't allow him to keep her, he gets pissed and reminds her that he is not her property. Much later, Reito tries to get some sleep, but then Erissa's necklace pings somewhere in the country, which makes him excited. Minutes later, a broadcast comes up on every screen, and Erissa introduces herself before saying that her goal is to expose the United Women's Organization. After showing the #4 man who just woke up, she reveals the first lie from the organization, which was keeping the men secret from everyone. The second is a bunch of abandoned satellites they found, which contain heavy residue of the virus, suggesting that they intentionally created and spread the virus. After explaining their plan to create a world filled with only women, she demands that all the men be released, but Shudo cancels the broadcast and claims the Izanami group is a terrorist organization trying to cause chaos. Minutes later, Reito storms into Chloe's office and demands answers, but she assures him that Erissa is a psychotic terrorist. As he continues asking questions, she uses his one weakness to make him leave and returns to her chambers to discuss with her superior. While all this was happening, Akane snuck into the facility's prison section to ask her mom a couple of questions to help them discover the truth. After meeting up with Reito, she suggests leaving the organization to see Erissa, but as they head back to his room, they are surprised to see Shota, who looks like he just had a 5-year glow-up in one night. The previous night, Karen placed the kitty-obsessed boy into an aging chamber to bring his body up to speed and finish his new look with a haircut. Back in the present, he gets introduced to Reito before Karen asks what he knows about Chloe. Reito then says that although she saved his life, he doesn't know enough about her to say that she can be trusted. With that, Karen tells Maria about her sister and immediately runs to a separate room to see Chifuyu. After they hug, Shota's girls admit to feeling overwhelmed by everything they have discovered recently. Chifuyu then asks Maria if she has had some of Reito's wood, but her reaction tells them everything they need to know. While they catch up, Karen tells Shota that Reito is still the naive man she heard he was when he first woke up. Shota then says he seems to be very smart, and after Karen explains his background in medical science, he asks about Yuzuki. She then tells him that Yuzuki is in a safe place that even her superiors don't know about. While Shota remains worried about Yuzuki, Reito calls Mira to his room and asks her to hop in the shower with him. She gets nervous, but then he takes her inside and explains that it's just a precaution to make sure they can talk in private. He then tells her about Erissa and asks if she can escape with them so they can figure out the truth for themselves. Shocked, Mira reminds him that she might be working for the very people he is worried about, but Reito says he is not worried because she has been there for him ever since he woke up. The next moment, Mira takes her clothes off and says she will only go if he takes her to Pound Town. As she leans on him, Reito gets disappointed and says she must really not want to come because she knows he will definitely say no. Mira then drops to her knees and says she actually wants to go, but she can't. After she recalls growing up and only hearing about him all her life, they hear someone breaking into the door before Pope walks in with soldiers to take them away. While walking towards a secret exit, she says that their lives are in danger, so she wants to take them back to America. She also tells Reito not to worry about the others because they have already been captured as well. The next moment, Sui and Akane knock her soldiers out, but Poke grabs Mira and threatens to blow her brains out if they don't get into the chopper. Thankfully, she gets tased by Rei, which surprises everyone. Hours later, the entire organization flips over as operatives rush to find Reita and the girls. Karen and Shota meet with Chloe to ask what is going on, but she tells them not to worry, so Karen decides to focus on their meeting. After assuring that Shota will be fully cooperative with them, she asks to meet the three Magi, who are the current leaders of the organization. Chloe gets shocked that she can make such a demand, but she takes it a step further by asking to be the national director of the Japanese branch because it makes more sense to give the position to a local. While all this is happening, Ria takes Shota and the girls to a secret location where Mahiru has been waiting with some refugees. Turns out, Rei had helped her escape with her tries to the locals, who then reminds Shota that she was a public relations officer before becoming his attendant. While they discuss a plan to get him and the others out of the city safely, Shota gives his girls the cream peas they have been desperate for. Afterwards, he meets with Karen, who then notes that he seems a lot more mature than she expected. When she tells him about Reito's escape, Shota gets surprised and says he didn't think Reito was that brave. By then, Rei has safely taken Reito and the others to an old ship by the docks, but she won't be able to leave with Mira. So Reito stays back to hug Mira and promises to come back for her. Once they get on the ship, Eris's friend shows up and says they will be going to a different city to avoid detection by the organization. Minutes later, Mahiru gives him a special tablet to talk to Hino, who also commends him for being so brave. After Reito apologizes for not taking him along, Hino tells him to stay safe and check in from time to time. Once they hang up, Neneko asks Ino if he wanted to leave with Reito, but Ino says he can't possibly leave his girls behind. Meanwhile, Shota has just seen Rina, and after he admits that she is pretty, an idea springs up in Karen's mind. Around the same time, Chloe punishes Pope for failing her mission, and after that, she calls Mira and Ria to her office to hear them out before sending them to prison. The next day, Karen takes Shota to the room for displaying baddies and says he is the only guy allowed to crack anyone he wants because she made arrangements with Chloe. Shota then sets his sights on Rina, while Reito finally arrives in the rural city and reunites with Erisa. After a long, intense hug, he promises to help her make a cure for the virus, and she gladly accepts. With the lovebirds finally reunited, will they save the world from those lunatic feminists, or is there more in store than they expected? And don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more recaps like this.